Too late wasn't just a phrase the German command used after the fact. It was the feeling that crawled into their bunker rooms when they finally understood what George S. Patton really was. Because at first they laughed him off. They called him loud, reckless, a noisy American general who moved fast but would burn out the moment he met real resistance. That was the assumption written into quiet intelligence reports and spoken with irritation over cigarette smoke and exhausted maps, until one detail began to crack their confidence. Patton wasn't stopping. He wasn't slowing down to reorganize. He wasn't waiting for perfect supply lines or safe conditions. He kept moving like time itself belonged to him, and the German high command wasn't just losing ground, they were losing control, because every hour they spent analyzing, he spent advancing. Every defensive line they prepared was already outdated by the time it was ready, and slowly their frustration changed into something far more dangerous: doubt. The kind of doubt that spreads through headquarters like a disease, because when your predictions fail once, you assume it's bad luck. When they fail twice, you assume it's chaos. But when they fail again and again, you realize the enemy isn't improvising, he's exploiting you. And that was the lesson Germany learned too late about Patton. He wasn't reckless, he was relentless. He didn't need to destroy the German army to defeat it. He only needed to break its decision-making. And he did that by turning speed into a weapon, because speed doesn't just move tanks, it moves fear, it forces panic, it shortens time, and it turns hesitation into a death sentence. Inside German headquarters, officers began to speak differently. The language of confidence disappeared. Reports became tense, conditional, cautious. Questions replaced certainty. Where is Patton now? How far can he reach by morning? What if he doesn't stop? What if he keeps going? And those questions were terrifying because the German command had built their entire war around one comforting rule. Every army must pause. Every commander must slow down. Every advance must eventually run out of fuel and reason. But Patton didn't obey that rule, and the more they waited for him to collapse, the more they collapsed instead, because they held reserves back for a counterattack that arrived too late. They reinforced defenses that had already been bypassed. They calculated distances the way wars used to move, not the way Patton moved, and soon their biggest mistake became obvious. They had been fighting a war of logic, while Patton was fighting a war of momentum, and momentum punishes. Delay with brutal precision. It makes yesterday's plan useless and tomorrow's plan irrelevant. It forces leaders into reaction, and reaction is where empires begin to fall, because once you are always responding, you are never controlling. And the German high command felt that shift like a knife turning slowly. The moment they realized they weren't setting the pace anymore, Patton was, and once he owned the pace, he owned the battlefield. Not through magic, not through luck, but through pressure. Constant pressure that squeezed decision-making until it snapped. And the most terrifying part was that the German command could see it happening but couldn't stop it, because to stop Patton they needed time, and time was the one thing Patton never gave them. And this is why the lesson matters. Because history isn't only written by the strongest, it's written by the fastest to act. While others hesitate, the German command did not lose because they lacked intelligence. They lost because they waited for certainty. And Patton attacked inside that waiting, inside that hesitation, inside that gap between what they expected and what was actually happening. And by the time they finally stopped asking when he would slow down and started asking how to contain him, the answer was already there in the maps, in the reports, in the silence between decisions. It was too late, and the question that remains is not what Patton did next, but what you would do when the world stops following the rules you trust. Would you hesitate like the German command? Or would you move like Patton while everyone else is still trying to understand what just happened?